actually in the screen?
Yep, you're right in the bullseye middle. And it's recording. I don't like it.
Why?
Because you're not smiling or anything.
Well, I'm not ready to shoot yet.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Hello there, Peabody here. And this is the Wayback Machine for traveling through time. And this is my boy, Sherman. Speak, Sherman.
Hello.
Hello again, Frontier Geek here, and as my friend Peabody just mentioned, we are setting the Wayback Machine. We're going all the way back to 12 May 2018, way before the Frontier Geek channel actually launched. So unfortunately, I really have no video of this project. So you might be wondering, if there's no video, kind of what's the point of making it? Well, okay, that's a legitimate question. Unfortunately, all I'm going to be able to insert here pretty much are just stills, but I think you'll still get the idea. This is my overhead switching project. There are 6 switches mounted just aft of the rear view mirror, right over where the microphone and the 2 dome lights are located. And I'm not the first one to do this. There have been several people already who have run this route, and I took my inspiration from their projects because I thought they came out pretty well. So as I mentioned, back in May of 2018, I decided to go ahead with my own project mimicking what they had done. So the first thing I did was went to superbrightleds.com and ordered up some switches and the bezel that went around them. They call them modular rocker switch brackets. And they're actually pretty neat because, as they mentioned, they are modular. Indeed, so what that means is there are centers and then there are also ends. So what you do is just count up the amount of switches you have, order as many centers as you need, so that would be the total count of your switches minus 2, and then go ahead and order 2 end plates, and these all snap together, and the switches actually get mounted into these brackets, which then get mounted into whatever panel or assembly you're actually working with. So what I did was went ahead and ordered these up, assembled the whole thing, snapping all of these switch brackets together, and then making a measurement for what I would need to cut out my hole. Now at this particular time, I was still living in an apartment. I had met my very soon-to-be wife at this time, but I still lived alone. So believe it or not, I actually did this project in my bathtub so that all of the plastic shavings that went flying would all be collected and they could be easily, neatly swept up. You got to do what you got to do when you don't have a workshop. You get creative. You really do. Sometimes people would think you're crazy, but sometimes crazy works. If you look at the photo, you'll see an absolute scary massive wire, and you're probably looking at this going, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? So if you look a little closer into the details, you'll notice that each switch has 2 reds, 2 blacks, and then another colored wire. So why are there 2 grounds, you might be asking? Very good question. The way these switches are configured, they have 2 LEDs inside of each switch. One LED can be wired that'll be on all the time, regardless of what the switch position is. And the second LED can be used to indicate if the switch is on or off, which is what I chose. So anyway, for the details. The way the factory decided to configure these is that each one of those LEDs has its own ground. Now, sure, it certainly would have been easier for them to hook everything together internally than you would have only had actually a minimum of 3 connections, yes. You'd need a ground, an input hot, and a output. So I'm assuming the reasoning here is that you can use this as either a dimmed positive going feed or dimmed ground line if you were so inclined to be changing the brilliance of the LEDs. However, I didn't do any of that. I just went ahead and wired them straight in. So that's why you can see all the daisy chaining. So basically what happens here is that whenever the truck is running, the key is in the on position, the first LED is illuminated. Throwing the rocker switch to the on position then goes ahead and flips the second LED, which then shows you that it's active. So without having to look too closely at the position of the switch itself, you can just tell by which ones are illuminated and which ones are not, which ones are active. Pretty simple at a quick glance. To make the overhead console easy to disassemble, I used WeatherPack type inline connectors. You can see them directly in the center of the photo. And I had so much wiring to pull that I ended up using 2 of them with 5 circuits each. As you can see, one of them is a male and the other one is a female. And no, those 2 do not plug into each other. They actually plug back into the harness in the truck. Why I did this is that it makes it quite simple if you go to service the vehicle later, that it is pretty much impossible to reconnect these incorrectly. Once you have pulled the overhead console assembly down, which just snaps in, it actually has no screws, you can then just reach up and remove both of those connectors, do whatever servicing was required, and then go ahead and put it back in with the absolute surety that you've got your wiring reattached correctly. Being that one is female, one is male, it'd be impossible to reconnect them backwards. Pretty simple, really. A little trick I picked up along the way from years back. As you can see on the rear, the hole that I cut is not beautiful. It's square from the front, at least enough that the bezel sits correctly and it doesn't sit at any kind of a weird angle or anything like that. It looks like it was done properly, but from the back you can see that it is kind of a little bit of a hack job. Unfortunately, as I'd mentioned earlier, I was pretty much using a handheld reciprocating saw in my bathtub. Not exactly a high-tech fabrication facility, but it did get the job done. They snapped in there very well, and I've had no problem with it. I didn't have to glue anything in place. They snapped in, and the supplied retaining tabs that came with the mounts were sufficient, and I've had zero trouble. This has been a great, flawless system the whole time it's been installed, which is coming up on 6 years now. The last photo in the sequence here is showing the underhood fuse and relay center, which I also fabricated from scratch. That was a lot more involved. I'll probably do a video on that, but at either of these projects, if you're thinking about taking them on yourself, I would strongly recommend that you have previous wiring experience, especially building the fuse and relay center. That was quite involved, not only with figuring out how all the wiring was going to go, but actually figuring out the physical size. It's actually sitting on top of the IPDM E/R, which is Nissan fancy word for all the relay boxes and fuses that are under the hood. And to get that unit to sit on top of that and not get smashed by the hood when it closed took an awful lot of prototyping. I actually took some thin cardboard and made 3D models several times, trying to get the size and shape and location to work correctly with everything else under the hood. Yeah, Nissan really didn't leave a whole lot of space for adding very many things. But as it turned out, it worked out very well. It fit correctly. The hood closed fine without any trouble. And that's also been flawless for last nearly 6 years. If you do your wiring right, and you're very conscientious when you're putting things together, most of the time you won't have problems. A lot of people seem to think that wiring is some sort of black magic, but it's really not. It's really pretty simple. I did a few videos on like a wiring 101 kind of thing if you want to go back and take a look at those. And I may go ahead possibly in a future video and publish all of the wiring schematics for these for whoever is already familiar with reading schematics if you really want to jump that far into building your own project. I know there are a lot of commercial units that are already available that are 6 and 8 circuit that are completely pre-engineered with a little push button panel that just mounts somewhere up in the truck, and I think they usually use, I'm going to say, I believe it's an Ethernet cord, very thin 8 conductor wire that just goes from one to the other and just sends it signals telling it what relays to turn on and off. But if you decide to shake and bake yourself like I did to save quite a bit of money, it turned out to be a fun project. Just a little bit of a headache, but it's still pretty amazing when I lift the hood and I tell somebody, yep, see that? I built that myself. And they're like, wow. No, that's pretty cool. So there's always that neat little factor of, yeah, I did it. Depends on how far you want to get involved. Hopefully, if you're deciding to add other accessories or off-road pieces, lighting, air compressors, anything of that nature, maybe power outlets in the bed for a refrigerator or something of that nature, hopefully this has given you some kind of inspiration to go ahead and jump in on that. I'd love to hear back. Please leave comments. Please subscribe to the channel. For today, Frontier Geek out. Until next time.